Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. I am your host, Adam Portrais, and I'm joined by sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet.
Why isn't this movie just called Caudill?
And, of course, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear with a really capable manservant.
If we all had capable manservants, our life would be so much easier. Or just, if I had the will to do anything. It's more on me than any of this stuff. But this week, we have gone to the lovely, lovely people who support us over at patreon.com/HMP. They have voted and they have told us what movie they would like us to watch. However, boys, there is a little bit of a controversy afoot.
Oh.
So how it happens, we put out the vote here and everything. This was actually one of our tightest voting competitions ever throughout the history of Patreon. And by the time that we actually declared a winner, which was on Wednesday, there were more votes afterwards. So this is, and I'll be honest, I didn't put up a time limit for people specifically of like, hey, votes close here. But that is kind of what happened. But we kind of got an email because somebody kind of decided to do something a little bit different. We'll talk about that probably come next episode. But here are the actual voting parameters with which everyone had to choose from. The Green Hornet, Robin Hood from 1938, Richie Rich, The Kitchen, or the just perennial all-star Sam J. Jones in The Spirit. Green Hornet won as the deadline crossed. But late in the game, rallying up in the end, is Robin Hood from 1938. So technically, if you count the entire week, Robin Hood won. But today we're going to be covering the Green Hornet. So we'll see about that. But I do want to welcome then, speaking of which, is the new people. We got a couple of new subscribers over at Patreon that I think may or may not have had something to do with that vote going one way or another. First and foremost, we do want to say, because get this, here's our two new patrons, or at least there's a couple of them. Here's two new ones coming in at the $1 level. We have Robin of Loxley.
Oh boy.
Sounds interesting, but when you see that at first, it's like, oh, no big deal. That's just someone's name. They got that, no big deal. But then the next one came in. And the other shoe dropped. Coming in again at the $1 level, Maid Marian.
Okay.
See, that's when I knew something was afoot.
I want to go on record as saying I fully endorse manipulating the vote if you're willing to spend $1 to do it. I'm all on board for that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, get on top of it and just figure out how you want to do it. But we'll see what we can do about that one. But I also want to welcome someone else to the Patreon family here. Coming in at the $5 level, Neil Adams. I'm sorry. That's the Neil Adamson. It's very close to the amazing artist. I wish if Neil Adams, listened to this show even once, I'd be pretty happy. But Neil Adamson, you know what? You listen to this show and you help support us. That's why we love you. And the hell with Neil Adams. Forget him. He's no good. I don't care what his decades of fantastic comic art has given us.
Could be his son that joined.
Hey, there you go. You know what? I got to think about it the right way. Thank you, Bruce. And Brian Kerr also came in at the $5 level. So, Brian, welcome to the family as well. Do we have HMP nicknames for these guys? I know I didn't drop it onto you until just this second.
Man, you're gonna have to remind me next week.
We're gonna table this,
just through that,
and we'll see it. No worries.
I think the son of Neil Adams works.
Son of Neil Adams, that is your name. I think that one is actually pretty clear. That's good.
But Brian Kerr deserves one that's not. No, actually, that was his nickname, the son of Neil Adams. We got to come up with another one for Neil Adamson.
We'll figure out the official particulars. I dropped this on these guys a little bit too late. But if you'd like to do that, help support this show, and of course, be able to vote on a movie that we watch every single month, as well as get the pre-show, post-show, but especially the Dinger Zone right now. Because everybody, you are at the perfect place to get on with our Patreon, because we are covering all the Mission Impossible movies every single week over at the Dinger Zone for the next 6 weeks, or 5 weeks at this point, I guess. So this week we got Mission Impossible 2. And, these are good long reviews. Most of them average around 40 minutes. So check those out. We really have a whole lot of fun talking about some pretty good movies over there, those Mission Impossible films. Patreon.
Also, Brian from Rockland, New York, congratulations on beating COVID. Very good job by you, sir.
Good guy. So if you would like to help support us and all that kind of good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/HMP and join the fun today. As we said, with that Patreon vote comes this week's winner. Here is the trailer for The Green Hornet.
So, this is what you want out of your life. This gives you a sense of fulfillment. Drink? I spend all night writing about the corruption of this town. And you do nothing.
For today's top story, newspaper mogul James Reed was found dead, leaving his son in charge of his media empire.
Sorry to hear about your father.
Hey, Kato, you knew my dad pretty well, right? Now that he's gone, I'm thinking I haven't done anything good my whole life. I'm not sure what I should do.
Wanna see something cool?
Whoa! You did that? What did you think of my father?
Was a complex man.
Think about this, Kato. We've been completely wasting our potential. This city needs our help. We could be heroes. Here's what will make us different. We will pose as villains to get close to the bad guys. That way, no one will suspect we're really the good guys. I want you to take my hand, and I want you to come with me on this adventure.
I'll go with you, but I don't want to touch you.
Okay, you don't have to take my hand, but will you come with me on this adventure?
Okay.
Yes. What do we call him? The Green Hornet.
I'm Lenore Case. I'm the new secretary.
Perfect.
I want the head of the Green Hornet, and I want it tonight.
You know who you are? You're a human Swiss Army knife. Just when you think there couldn't be any more cool things, a new thing comes out. What's this?
It's a gas gun.
A gas gun? How does it even work?
Hey. Okay.
Let's roll, Kato. Red light, stop! Stop! The camera got us. Can I shoot one?
Alrighty, that was the trailer for The Green Hornet. Here's the IMDb plot line. Following the death of his father, Brett Reed, heir to his father's large company, teams up with his late dad's assistant, Kato, and to become the mass crime fighting team. This is directed by Michelle Gondry, written by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, starring Seth Rogen, Jay Chow, Christoph Waltz, Cameron Diaz, Tom Wilkinson, and more. Well, you know what time it is, everybody. Oh, come on. Bruce, what do we got this week?
The Green Hornet was created in 1936 as a character for radio, but quickly made the transition to comic books in December 1940, reaching early acclaim as part of Harvey Comics. The Green Hornet is the alter ego of Britt Reed, wealthy young publisher of the Daily Sentinel newspaper and son of, at least so far as the original canon is concerned, Dan Reed Jr. Now, you may or may not know this, but Green Hornet has crime fighting in his blood. How exactly so, you may ask? Well, I'm glad this hypothetical person asked a question I very much want to answer. Green Hornet's father was one of the earliest, if not very first, teen sidekicks. Shocking, right? Green Hornet's father, Dan Reed Jr., spent most of his youth going by the name Dan Frisbee. On account of when his parents died, he was taken in by a nice old lady on a wagon train named Grandma Frisbee. Now, eventually, Grandma Frisbee crossed paths with the mysterious Western masked man and hero, the Lone Ranger. And I guess she gave him 15-year-old Dan Frisbee so the young man could get some life experience. Well, as time went by, Grandma Frisbee found herself dying, and on her deathbed, she made a confession to the Lone Ranger. Her supposed grandson wasn't named Dan Frisbee. He was actually named Dan Reed Jr., and his father was Captain Dan Reed of the Texas Rangers, who led a group of 6 Rangers into an ambush at Bryant's Gap, an ambush in which the outlaw Butch Cavendish killed all of the Rangers. That is to say, all of the Rangers except for one. You could say a Lone Ranger survived this attack. That's right, ladies and fellas. The Lone Ranger was with Dan Reed Jr.'s father when he died. And in fact, the Lone Ranger wasn't just any Ranger with Dan Reed Jr.'s father. The Lone Ranger was, in fact, John Reed, the younger brother of Captain Dan Reed, which means that unbeknownst to all involved, the Lone Ranger was the uncle to his own teen sidekick, Dan. Everyone's mind was blown. So Dan went east and started a family. He had a son named Britt, and Britt Reed, of course, became the masked vigilante known as the Green Hornet. He had an extremely competent sidekick, Kato, and drove a car with a horse's name. He was nothing if not a modern-day Lone Ranger, carrying on his great-uncle's crime-busting tradition. So why on earth do these two crime fighters have this sort of weird, sort of cool family connection? Because they were both stars of radio programs on WXYZ in Detroit, Michigan. Both shows produced by George Trendle. The Lone Ranger premiered in 1933 and the Green Hornet in 1936. And even when TV shows were audio only, people knew the value of a good spinoff. Yes, the Green Hornet was the Frasier to the Lone Ranger's Cheers, the Mork and Mindy to the Lone Ranger's Happy Days, maybe even the Trapper John M.D. to the Lone Ranger's MASH. And thank goodness the Lone Ranger never had an after MASH. Could you imagine the Lone Ranger moving to Philadelphia, trying to learn to drive a car, trying to be a Philadelphia beat cop? Actually, I think I just sold myself on that show. Maybe I'll write a letter or something and see if I can get it made. Anyway, that's what I got this week for your comic connection. A theoretical radio show about the Lone Ranger becoming a modern-day beat cop.
Dear Mr. Hollywood. That's how he starts off his letters.
I think you should make a radio show with moving pictures to it.
This boy's got some brains on him right here. So the year is 2011, and it was interesting because when this project had been gestating for some time, you'd always kind of heard a little bit of back end couple years previous to this. At one point, this, as I said last week, this was going to be a movie that was directed by Hong Kong superstar Stephen Chow. And so he was going to direct it, and he was going to star in it as Kato. But for whatever reason, and I listened to the audio commentary, or most of it for this episode and everything, they never really quite go into exactly what went wrong or exactly what they didn't quite mesh with or anything. But instead of him, we got Michel Gondry directing this, which I was also like, wow, what an interesting choice, because a couple years prior, he directed one of my favorite films of all time, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So I'm like, if this guy's coming in there, okay, let's check it out. We got Christoph Waltz, kind of hot off his Tarantino train here and everything. Seth Rogen at this point, though, I would say, I think what made this movie ultimately, because it cost like $120 million, it made like 98 domestically. Not great by any stretch, but I'd say overall with worldwide, it's probably just at maybe profitable. But I think this is the point where we were all starting to get just a little bit Seth Rogen'd out at this time. Does anyone else remember it like that?
Maybe. I don't know, man. This movie was stuck in development for like 20 years, though. Like it goes way back before Stephen Chow, from what I read. Like it started in the 90s with George Clooney attached to be the Green Hornet.
I could see that.
Yeah, then he got the Batman gig, gave up the Green Hornet gig, and Greg Kinnear I saw listed as somebody that was maybe considered. Also in the 90s, Jason Scott Lee signed on as Kato because he did such a good job as Kato in that Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. You remember? You've seen that, haven't you, Adam?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a pretty memorable scene when, he's as Kato showing up on the first day of filming or whatever. At some point, allegedly, Mark Wahlberg was offered the role. Not only Stephen Chow, but going back before then, Jet Li was kind of sort of signed on to play Kato for a while.
See, that really makes a lot of sense because, he's redone even some of, obviously Bruce Lee's roles from back in the day with Fist of Legend and stuff like that, which is basically a remake of The Chinese Connection.
And then in the what might have been moment when I was looking into all the history of the development of this, at one point, Christopher McQuarrie was writing a script, which I think would have been really cool. I think it would have been a very different movie. Miramax got the rights with the guy who just can't lose, Harvey Weinstein, hiring Kevin Smith to write and direct the film. Jake Gyllenhaal was approached. Then when that whole Miramax thing fell apart, Smith actually, I don't know if he took his script or expanded it or what, but Dynamite, printed a comic book, Green Hornet, written by Smith after all that. And then we got to Nicolas Cage to play the part of Chudnowski. He was apparently pretty deep into doing that role until there were some creative differences.
They did meet with him. This crew did meet with him for that role, and it was as Nick Cage as you wanted it to be. And they said once he finished his lines and stuff, you could tell he was almost kind of like waiting for a big giant applause or something.
I honestly picture like the sit down just with my imaginary version of Nicolas Cage. Like they all sit down at the table and he goes, "Okay, so you want me for Kato, right?"
I feel like Kato is could be a white guy if you wanted him to. Think about this. But they saw Jay Chow, who we actually talked about at Initial D a couple episodes ago. They saw him in a movie called Kung Fu Dunk. And apparently they enjoyed that quite a bit, so got him in there. And I'll say this, as much as a Stephen Chow fan as I am, and I would have liked to see where this movie would have gone under his direction, and of course co-starring there as Kato, I got to say, I thought Jay Chow was like way better. I like this guy a lot more now than I did in Initial D, because in Initial D, he is kind of like one note. There's not a lot really going on there. His half the part of his character is playing sleepy. And this character is actually involved and has, he feels like a character as opposed to a characterization.
6 years ago when we started this podcast, what would you have thought the over-under was for us covering 2 Jay Chow movies in the same calendar month?
Jay Chow's Google alerts are going off, man. What the heck? Hey, man, I might have another wave here. What's going on?
And the one with subtitles and race cars would be the good one. I mean, wow.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say it then. I completely disagree. I get the vibe coming off of Sean. I hear Bruce over here. I enjoyed this movie quite a bit.
What are you talking about, vibes coming off of me? I haven't said anything?
No. I felt it earlier. I don't know. Maybe it's...
No, I think you've got him maybe confused with me. I don't think Sean said anything.
Okay, well, let's lay it out here because this movie seems divisive. What do you got, Sean?
The movie's a mess. There's a lot of wrong moves in this movie, and I know that they did the best they could with what they had. Basically, it's wrong headed from the get of go, as far as I'm concerned, because what they needed to make with this movie is basically they needed to make an action movie that's funny, and they didn't do that. Instead, what they did was they made a comedy disguised as an action movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even
with the material that's all that well.
Yeah, I don't even think they went to the trouble of trying to disguise it. I think they just made a comedy and put a little action in it.
And that's the wrong move, especially with this property. When you have a character that is as cool as Kato, because I don't think that any of us would disagree that the idea of a Kato is a very cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
You are now muddying that water by having Seth Rogen do so much in this movie. And I know that Seth Rogen is your money, and that's how you got it going in the first place. But here is the major issue: is that you have Seth Rogen and Adam Goldberg. You have them writing this movie, and that's wrongheaded. They're not strong enough writers to be able to pull this off yet. They probably are now, but at the time in 2011 they weren't. And so there's all these weird asides, and they're trying to shoot it where it's sort of like you're watching just another version of Knocked Up for a while. There's a half an hour where you're watching Seth Rogen just be a rich jerk, and that doesn't embolden an audience member to go, oh, you know what? I actually like this guy. Seth Rogen is many things, but he is not Bill Murray. And Bill Murray is able to pull that off. Seth Rogen is not.
I think you just nailed what I didn't like about it, because I'm enjoying this movie for about an hour, and I'm like, okay, enough. We got to get on with this. And I feel like they never really get on with this. So I think you just kind of nailed it. I think what would have been perfect First off, the Green Hornet, you don't have to make this a comedy. You know what I mean? It's not like a character. It's not like The Tick. If I saw a gritty, serious Tick movie, that would be wrong. So you can make the Green Hornet with a little more serious tone. But if you are going to make it a comedy, the movie I would tell you to watch, not because the story or anything, but the people that balanced it perfectly, the comedy and the action, the way this movie needed to do it. And that's Zorro the Gay Blade that we all watched. And as far as I remember, we all liked that.
Boy, that's a way different movie than this one.
I didn't watch it. I wasn't on that show with you guys.
I'm sorry. I forgot about that.
Do yourself a favor.
Yeah, it's worth watching.
It's hilarious. It's fantastic.
I totally want to. The tone that this movie really needs to take, even though it's not the same movie, is it needs to take a Beverly Hills Cop tone.
Oh, yeah.
Because Beverly Hills Cop nails it. Because Beverly Hills Cop is an action movie that is funny. This is not that. And when you're trying to get a story across about, like masked vigilantes, you can't keep having these asides where he's worried about his latte and all of this crap. Like that's all garbage, and you don't need any of that stuff. When you have him being funny and you have Kato being funny, and then you even have the bad guy being funny, like that's too much funny. You need to have a narrative where one of those people can be funny, but all three of them being funny doesn't work so well. And it doesn't lend itself, like even in that opening scene where you see Jodorowsky for the first time, it's not only him being funny, it's also Crystal Clear being funny. It's too much. This isn't what this movie should be. This movie needs to be an action movie that's funny, and it's not that.
And I agree with you, man. You got Christoph Waltz being Jodorowsky. He could really bring the menace to balance this out instead of seeming like a cartoon from beginning to end. And then also, if your hero is going to be funny, he can either tell jokes, or it can be funny that he's incompetent, but he can't be incompetent and tell jokes. Do you follow me? Like he's being funny in too many different ways.
Yes, agreed.
Like that's what made Adam West so funny in the old 66 Batman, is that he's playing it straight, but you're not believing it for a minute. But here, he's playing it comedic. And
and that's something that this, even if you were going to go that way with it, where you're playing it like it's the 60s television show, you could totally make that work also. But they don't do that either. They're spending buttloads of money on this thing, and it's for no reason. You don't need all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one thing that you watch this, and this very much seems like a no expenses spared ordeal.
I think it's a bad sign. They offered Van Williams a cameo. Van Williams, of course, played the Green Hornet on the 60s TV show. They offered him a cameo, and he's like, "Nah, I'm cool. I got nothing going on, but still, I'll pass."
Well, I
think that's what happened with Stephen Chow. I think that ultimately the reason why he turned it down was he probably read the script and went, "No, thank you."
Yeah, the weird thing is he turned down being director, but stayed on as an actor for a while before he dropped out altogether.
But I think at the same time too, I don't know that I think the movie that Stephen Chow directs is even like more zany and over the top, leaning more towards funny than this movie is.
Sure,
yeah, but it's also going to be a lot of the humor is going to be choreography, not sexual harassment. You know what I mean? Like did Stephen Chow direct Shaolin Soccer?
Mm-hmm.
Like all the humor in that works great, and I'm not because we have any recognizable comedic stars, to me at least. But it's just it's tight and it's written well, and there's physical humor, and at the end of the day, they're still like competent in some way. They're either competent and doing it in a funny way, or if they're incompetent, they're trying to be. It's just, I think you can make this way more leaning into the humor if you're leaning into the humor the proper way.
And that's what I guess the difference that I had watching this is because at least the way that I'd only ever seen like the trailer way back in the day, even despite being, Michel Gondry fan, I didn't actually end up going to see this because a lot of people didn't say super hot things. And again, it to me at that time, it felt like a lot of Seth Rogen, kind of overflow of like, okay, we've had enough. We get it. He's a new star. He's big, good deal. But this time around, like especially when the movie starts off and you got Christoph Waltz, in that room and he's talking to James Franco, I'm like, okay, all right. For some reason, Franco being in there tuned me into watching this more as just a comedy that had those action moments in it. And I think because it was why I kind of liked it, is really juxtaposed to having the action that has some comedy. I like the comedy that had some action to it. I guess it felt like a change from the thing that we always are kind of watching in these movies.
Well, if you're going to do that, if you're going to try to do something different, you have a baseline problem with this thing, which is that you have Seth Rogen and you have Jay Chow, and just as an audience member, you're not used to seeing Jay Chow in anything, period. And for Seth Rogen, you're used to seeing him in PG-13 comedies, right? Which is fine. All of that is fine. But if you're going to have them be your two main roles in this movie, you probably shouldn't hire Christoph Waltz as your bad guy, because instantly you like Christoph Waltz's character better just because the performance is so great.
That's true.
And Chudnovsky there is something inherently great about him really questioning why he's not so scary. Like, that's very, very funny. But the problem is that he is one of a cacophony of jokes that don't land. And then you have this one joke that lands. And my eyes immediately go to Christoph Waltz because he's just a vastly better performer than Seth Rogen is. And so if you're going to make a movie about Green Hornet, maybe you get somebody with a little more gravitas than the two people that you have in these roles in the first place. Because I'm kind of rooting for Chudnovsky for the entire movie watching this thing over what's happening with this guy that we've been hanging out with for a half hour, and he's kind of a prick. And, I don't know if it's Jay Chow's fault because I just don't know him. At the time when I first saw this thing, I had no idea who he was. We've seen Initial D. I as you guys know, I really like that movie.
Yeah.
But and it does add so much more having seen Initial D, now seeing him as Kato. It's like, oh, hey, it's my guy. Like, I like that guy. But at the time seeing this, I had not seen that movie yet, so I don't know who this guy is. And so, and he doesn't have that thing that Bruce Lee has where your eye just immediately goes to him. Whereas Jay Chow, a very good performer and very, very good. He ain't no Bruce Lee. And so it's kind of it's a fundamental problem that you have with your movie when you're immediately rooting for the bad guy.
And a lot of my complaint, like, I like Seth Rogen. Like, overall, I like Seth Rogen.
Me too.
I like his writing and his acting. All the complaints that I'm having here with him as the Green Hornet, most of those statements could be taken and applied to Chris Pratt as Star-Lord, and they're not necessarily false, but I love Chris Pratt as Star-Lord. So there's a certain intangible, or at least to me, I can't wrap my head around how to put it into words, but it's so weird that they're very, very alike in a lot of ways, those characters, and one works for me so well and one doesn't.
Well, I think that the problem is intelligence, right? Because with Seth Rogen is inherently a smart person, and it comes across just looking at him that you can tell that this guy is smart. He's just making really bad choices. Where someone like Chris Pratt, I would be the most shocked human being in the world if Chris Pratt one day writes a script that wins an Oscar. Whereas Seth Rogen, I could totally see him and his writing partner writing a script that does become Oscar worthy.
Well, it's called 50-50.
Is never going to be smart enough to the point where you're like, well, come on, you should know better than this. Whereas that is absolutely what it feels like watching Seth Rogen.
And yeah, I think you've hit on something there, which is weird. but yeah, I like when Chris Pratt's doing some of this stuff. Also, there's a certain sincerity that's lacking in Seth Rogen's Green Hornet here. Like if he's not good at it, but he's really sincerely trying to be good at it, I can get behind it. But I feel like, man, this feels like rich kid who wants to be a DJ. I mean, that's what this feels like. And that's what they're trying to make it feel like. Whereas with Kick-Ass, he's never any good at it, but man, he wants to be good at it so bad. Here, Seth Rogen's not any good at it, and he's not really putting that much effort into being good at it either.
You know what scene is missing from this movie is the scene that makes Knocked Up work, which is that when she is pregnant and she is in the hospital and he has that moment with the doctor where he pulls the doctor aside and he's trying his damned hardest to get the doctor to take them seriously. It makes that movie flip on a dime where you're like, oh, this guy legitimately, honestly cares and is trying his hardest. And there's no scene like that in this movie.
Yeah, that turn scene where all of a sudden Kato goes, okay, he's taking this a lot more seriously than he's led on to believe. Sure, he's this, lighthearted, comedic kind of character and everything in this, but according to what this little speech or whatever he just gave, makes me realize that, like, this actually means something to him. And you're right, that's missing in this.
And even, similar, like what you said there with the scene of him talking to the doctor, or I would even say like Tommy Boy asking for the tater tots or whatever in the diner, where he kind of finds like even, okay, you're never going to be able to fight like Kato, but let's find something that you are good at that works. And, maybe he embraces that gas gun and it turns out he's really good at distracting people so Kato can fight him. I mean, you can always like do that message where there's more than one way to be a hero. They never do any of that. And maybe life's embittered me over the past 9 years, but I'm not really all that pumped up to see a story about a rich guy who gets propped up by an underpaid employee,
Well, the whole Cameron Diaz thing as well is like a real strange one, because her character really is used as like a bad cipher for, trying to figure out the story and how they want to present themselves to the world. I thought that was a really strange road to go down.
And that's an actual character from the TV show, probably the radio show. I don't know. I haven't listened to the radio show, but they've given her a pretty solid update, though. They've actually made her a key part of the team, which was kind of cool.
Well, at least she's in there because, like, and they admit as much as they have to keep her around because she's the only one who's kind of competent, and they don't really know what they're doing.
Well, yeah, she's the brain. Kato is also the brain and the brawn. And what does Green Hornet bring into it other than, he's got the money?
There you go. It's the money.
Yeah, but they need to find something for him to bring to it, which the original did. He was like an investigative reporter turned vigilante.
Yeah.
And,
okay, so that's more the angle that they probably should have gone, is like at least maybe slightly more detective-y, maybe?
Or
well,
even it could even just.
And here's the thing: is that if Seth Rogen and Adam Goldberg had written
Evan, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that.
I'm sorry,
Evan Goldberg. I just want to just.
Evan, sorry, it's
no
Evan
worries.
Goldberg. Sorry, thank you, Adam. I don't want to feel like an idiot. Sorry, man. If they would have written this script now, they would definitely have that scene in there. They're far better writers now than they were 10 years ago, and this would be a far more entertaining movie. Also, I think, when you look at the other things that they've done over the past few years here, they've gotten better with their writing and the character arcs and things like that, and they know what's missing from scripts. Whereas this here is, it honestly feels like, hey, let's get a bunch of really good people and dick around for 2 hours.
Yeah, and when you and I noticed it watching the movie ahead of time, and then they talked a little bit about it in the audio commentary and stuff, is that there's a lot of ADR in this movie. Which leads me to believe that they were really just trying to pull anything out that they possibly could to throw in some laughter, to throw in something, because I don't think that they came to the table with a 110% fully realized story and everything that they're looking to do, because it's clear that they made a lot of different choices and stuff, and then we're like, ooh, maybe we need to lean more into comedy or something like that. That's what it felt like.
And I think there's a part two to this that I think it builds on what you said, that they're a better writing team now. But I think in 2011, Seth Rogen liked superheroes. You know, it's clear he's always liked superheroes. That shows in the stuff he's worked on more recently. This was probably the only property he could get, but there's not really a whole lot of humor in the source material. And he still thinks, well, everybody knows me as this certain type of character in this certain type of movie. And he wasn't comfortable breaking out of that. And he sort of tried to fit comedy and more specifically, maybe PG-13 comedy into a property that just didn't have any to begin with. It's not like the dark comedy from the Garth Ennis stuff he's been adapting more recently. So, I mean, It might just be a bad fit and a bad time and maybe a little lack of confidence into saying, you know what, I'm going to try to make the best Green Hornet movie I can make, not a good comedy that's based on the Green Hornet.
And he still came from a very R-rated world at this time. This is kind of one of the first couple times here where it's like it's pulled back from the R to go to the PG-13. And, of course, at that point, if you've had a history of having, you know, as much leeway as you want to, being restricted then, you know, will change up how you do things, sometimes for the better for some people and sometimes for the worse.
Yeah,
I agree.
Let's talk about a couple of things here. First of all, David Haber. We forgot to mention him there, but he plays the guy what's he running for? District Selectman?
David Harbour. Yeah, he plays Scanlon, the district attorney Scanlon. And you know, I've seen this movie before, but I haven't seen it since Stranger Things. And like, Dave Harbour didn't exist to me until Stranger Things. So it was, like, really
it's funny,
shocking.
man. That guy shows up in literally everything.
Yeah.
But I never noticed him. And now watching it through the second time, it's kind of cool, man. He's all, you know, Hellboy is the district attorney here.
But I thought he was pretty good. I thought he was like a good addition to this and everything. He's a couple years younger and a few pounds lighter and everything, but he looks like a guy who could, you know, beat the crap out of you at split second.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. This script also, you know, if this movie was made, I don't know, I would say it's safe to say if it was made in 2000, probably would have been received better. You know, if this is made in a Iron Man world or pre-Kick-Ass world even, you know, where this felt kind of novel, but nothing here really feels novel either.
Yeah, it feels like 2011 was probably the worst time for this project to kind of come out. You're right. I think if we'd have gone earlier or even post this, once we've kind of grown into the superhero world that we live in now, then it would have been either way, it would have been a different kind of story and certainly received a lot differently, I think.
And we hadn't already seen a movie that I liked. I know not everybody else liked it, but a really good movie with an incompetent hero or wannabe hero like Kick-Ass. We hadn't seen a really good mixture of comedy and action like we had with Iron Man. I mean, this, you know, if this was coming out when we're watching some of those X-Men movies and Blade movies and stuff, I think we remember it more fondly.
Oh, yeah. Sean, still there? Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. I think it's a mess either way. You know,
Well, I think not specifically
so
this movie,
this
though.
movie, that it doesn't matter when you release it. It's still a bad movie. You know,
there are a lot of movies that I remember thinking weren't that bad, and then we rewatch them for the show, and I say, "Oh man, that was a mess." But I saw it at a time when I was more forgiving. So maybe if I'd seen this for the first time in the year 2001, I would remember it differently and bring a little positive. Well,
but you know, I mean, you know what this movie kind of relates to more than any other superhero or vigilante movie is The Shadow and The Phantom. And both of those movies completely tanked because they're bad. They're a mess.
I have to concede that point to you. You're 100% on that.
Yeah, and I think that this is of that ilk. You know, and also all three of those properties are based off of a radio drama, and so I think if we're I think there is a version of a good Green Hornet movie. But it's not something that, like, people don't cherish this thing, you know. No. There aren't people who are, with very few exceptions. I mean, sure, there's super fans for anything, But I think, I mean, what are you talking? Let's say 100. Let's say there's 100 super Green Hornet fans. For basically everyone else, no matter how nerd you are, you just have a passing interest in this property. And so if you're going to make a Green Hornet movie, you basically need to make, well, like I said at the top of the show, I think you need to make it an action movie that is funny instead of what they're doing here.
Yeah. And you need to make it on a lower budget too.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Green Hornet, like in terms of Hollywood numbers, 100,000 diehard fans are not going to do squat for your box office. You know what I mean? 2011, 100,000 people pay $10 each. That's still just $1 million. Like you're getting nowhere, but you make it a little bit cheaper, a little bit more stylized. You can turn around on it. I think that the producer, I saw this quote from Neil Moritz, who was a producer on this. He said, essentially, if he had done this in a tax rebate state instead of California, it probably would have been considered a huge financial success because it made like $220 million. You make this thing for 50, 60 million. They're happy with that. And we're seeing Green Hornet 3 that we have to review in 2 weeks.
They even talk about that. They were like, it was funny because it kind of came out of one and then the other. I think Evan first said it was just like, it was kind of so nice that we didn't think that we'd actually be able to kind of shoot in LA, but we did. And like 2 seconds after, Rogan's just like, yeah, but like, honestly, this could have been shot anywhere. It's like, if you really look at it, it's like, I think they even realized they were like, oh, it was just so lovely to go home and sleep in your own bed every night. But at the same time too, I think they also realize that they spend way too much money on this movie. I mean, the whole newsroom there and everything at the newspaper is 100% set, and that thing looks fantastic. Just from like, there's so much going on there. That whole set looks so expensive, and then they destroy the whole thing. So like, it's a lot of money on screen.
And I don't know what the hot tax rebate states were in 2011, but
Vancouver.
You could have made this movie just fine in Charlotte.
Yeah,
you got enough skyline, enough city. You got a place you can drive dump trucks in a circle. That's all you need for this.
Get a couple of second units off to do your LA thing, and it's doable. But they spend a lot of money staying in town for this.
And with you saying that, Bruce, this movie probably could have benefited from being in a weird town. Just make that town a character also, because they do a whole lot of walking around in this movie. I don't know where that thing is, but when you think of
internet lost there. When we think of
itself becomes a character.
Hold on one sec.
You can hide a whole lot more sin when you're somewhere else.
Yeah. So we lost you for a little bit, but I think what you said is you do the thing where the city itself becomes a character, and that
that is exactly it.
Yeah, and I think like one of those decayed urban areas like Detroit in 2011 or today, Memphis. There are some towns. I don't know if Michigan would have been a tax rebate state, but boy, I think this works well in a really dingy, sort of a downtown that's seen better days.
I think they do have some rebates. If you make
this movie in Cincinnati, it's a totally different movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that would have made something interesting of just having a different location other than LA to make it feel like it's distinctive. I mean, we see so many things that come out of Hollywood all of the years Hollywood has existed, that it all, in a strange sense, starts feeling like the same thing over and over.
And would have had a big financial benefit too. Like I said, if you could make roughly equal quality movie for $45 million, they would have made 2 more of these.
Yeah. So I'm sorry that we keep hopping around here, but Adam, why do you like this movie so much?
Just the regular conceit. Like I said, I didn't know that it was going to be as kind of funny as it was. And honestly, like I said, Franco at the beginning really threw me off. I was just like, oh boy, Franco's in this. Well, Franco's a good actor, but then he's playing James Franco has 2 functions, right? He's got amazing dramatic actor, and he's also got like wild and crazy James Franco. He's in wild and crazy James Franco mode in this movie. And so I was like, oh, great, a cool, like, serious, like, hey, this is my territory now kind of performance from him. And that's not what he was giving. He was given a more comedic performance. So that kind of changed my mind right then and there as to what kind of movie that I was watching. And I liked all the... and so I took it more from a comedy that has action as opposed to an action that has comedy. And I liked a lot of just the visual cues and stuff that Michel Gondry does in here. I love the Kato vision. It's kind of cool having something like that that's new and unique that we don't really see
I'll give you that.
in other
like
movies.
that.
I thought that was neat. I like the way that, especially during that first fight scene where all the cars like elongate and everything, and he's walking across them and stuff. Just things that don't happen in real life. I didn't see this in the movie theater, but it was in 3D. And I think that would have been like super cool, especially like in 2011 when they weren't doing that quite as much as they are these days. But I just visually, tonally, it's not perfect, but like I think I've quickly realized watching this movie what this movie was and what it was trying to be, and maybe my expectations were so low, it satisfied them well enough, I guess.
I think for me though, the comedy didn't work. You're talking about it as a comedy movie with a little action. When I first went in to see this, I was pretty much just expecting a comedy. I wasn't really even looking for the superhero part to be much. But I don't think I'm laughing in the second half of this movie. And the biggest part is like the humor isn't varied at all. It's, an analogy I've used before. It's a guy who's got a great 10 minutes, but he's on stage for 15 and he does all the good stuff first.
That's fair.
By the second half, I'm like bored that the jokes aren't funny because it's the same joke over and over again, and it's just, I could have, there's not even like good physical humor, which is something Seth Rogen could have done because, no matter how many times you fall down and rip your pants, I'm still going to keep laughing at that at least. Like if you're not going to spice it up, then you got to go vaudeville.
Well, we got a couple of crotch shots in it. I figured that would have, put you over the top for at least a Stephanie Brown.
Admittedly, I've got a low bar for comedy, and I'm not laughing in the second half of this.
I get it. I don't know. Again, I think it was just such low expectation. I love the stupidity of it. Christoph Waltz bringing out his, double-barreled Desert Eagle is ridiculous. It's so stupid.
I like that. Yeah, I laugh at that. That's funny. At one part I did laugh at the end is when Seth Rogen stabs him like each eye socket with
that was awesome. I love that.
So there's a little bit the second half I did laugh at.
I like seeing Edward James almost not look like he realizes he's in a movie.
Oh man!
It feels like he just kind of wandered on set.
Why is he even in this movie?
He does. Like, you don't need somebody of that caliber to be in this role. You just
really
don't.
As a matter of fact, it's kind of it kind of distracts. I mean, because you're expecting him to have at least
something.
One big moment in this thing, and he doesn't.
He's just kind of like, that's Edward James almost in this entire film. It's him just kind of grumbling and going like, your dad's paper.
You want to make a bit of a comedy. You want to be a little farcical. You got Edward James almost. Have a scene where he's trying to reach these kids and teach Seth Rogen how to do something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like have him really bring out the Escalante from his repertoire.
That would have been good. I will say though, not a big part, but he's always given it like he does 1,000,000,000% in everything that he's in. Tom Wilkinson killing it.
Yeah.
That dude just like it doesn't matter what movie he's in.
He's great, but maybe they overspent for the cranky dad who dies in the beginning.
Maybe, but it also
I have a very hard time believing that Tom Wilkinson is Seth Rogen's father.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see that. But yeah, look, overall, I didn't. We'll talk about it at the end. But I liked it a lot more than I think that I initially had thought that I would. And this just may be a lowered expectations kind of thing. Also, one of my favorite reoccurring sketches on Mad TV.
Oh, was there a recurring Green Hornet sketch on Mad TV?
No, lowered expectations.
No, lowered expectations.
I thought that was Saturday Night Live.
No, that was a Mad TV bit, and it was good. I always enjoyed it. It was like that. It was Mad TV's Jack Handy.
Yep, you're right. It worked. Well, hey, it's something to get you excited. Less than 2 weeks ago, April 16th, 2020, less than 2 weeks ago of this recording, Universal Pictures announced the reboot for the Green Hornet, titled Green Hornet and Kato.
Now, okay, let's cast this though. Granted, he's worn a mask like this before, but if you put Armie Hammer in this Brett Reed role, I'm down.
Yeah, me too.
And here's a twofold prediction. Kato in this one that they're making now for the 2021, Kato's a female, and people who never cared about the Green Hornet complain how they're not sticking to tradition.
Oh man, yeah, that's a good. That's no bet. That will definitely happen.
But if they I cannot remember her name off the top of my head, but the gal that played Go-Go in Kill Bill, I think she would be good if you did like a female Kato kind of thing.
Yeah, I could go with that.
I'm trying to think of how old she might be at this point.
I just want a good movie.
Yeah, just make a good film, will you? And John C. Reilly as Chudnovsky.
Oh man,
yeah, that's an easy sell.
It's just like the tickets sell themselves.
And for Armie Hammer's dad, I like that Armie Hammer's Britt Reed.
I think he'd be great.
Yeah.
For Armie Hammer's dad, I think you need like a little guy, because then it's all weird. How did this big guy come from that little guy?
Clint Howard as Armie Hammer's father.
I could be in for that.
Be like, what did your mother look like? Gorgeous. Well, before we get to our final ratings here and everything, we do have to ask ourselves one of the most important questions anyone can ask themselves at any given time throughout their entire life is how this movie relates back 1-to-1 with Sylvester Stallone.
Why, thank you, Adam. I happen to have a prepared statement.
Mm-hmm.
James Newton Howard is the composer for this movie.
I can't believe I didn't mention
He's a
his
Hans
name.
Zimmer guy. Say what?
I said, I can't believe I forgot to mention him. He's actually, the score in this is really good. Go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting.
James Newton Howard is the composer for this movie. He's a Hans Zimmer guy. And he wrote the song Hold On to Your Vision, which is on the soundtrack to Cobra. That song is track 5 on the Cobra soundtrack. And if you're wondering, it sounds a little bit like this. Magnificent. That song definitely doesn't sound like every 80s soundtrack song ever made. Would this song be out of place in The Last Dragon, Short Circuit, Mannequin, or One Crazy Summer? James Newton Howard, you're a genius. If we could talk about the movie Cobra for a minute, there's a rumor that there's a version of Cobra 30 to 40 minutes that will never be released by Warner Brothers because it's X-rated. And I think I speak for everyone when I say no one has any interest in what it looks like when Sylvester Stallone and Brigitte Nielsen do the stuff. The movie Cobra exists because Stallone has done a massive rewrite to the movie Beverly Hills Cop. And when he was told that his rewrite made the movie too expensive, Dude Bro boogied to this project, Cobra, paving the way for the greatest comedy action movies of all time, Beverly Hills Cop and Beverly Hills Cop 2. There's a rumor floating around that there's a third Beverly Hills Cop movie, but I choose to believe that movie doesn't exist, much like another 48 Hours, the fourth Indiana Jones movie, and our game show that everyone seemed to hate. Look, the point is, I'm trying to make this point here. James Newton Howard is your Stallone connection this week, and he might be a musical genius. I'm Sean Kovacs, and I'm just going to say it. You're welcome, English speakers. You're welcome.
Well, at Hero Movie Podcast, we have our own patented Robin rating system. If you'd like to check that out, head on over to Hero Movie Podcast, Facebook.com/Hero Movie Podcast. It's right there at the top of the screen. Bruce, where does Green Hornet from 2011 fall on the Robin rating system for you?
I'm still dwelling on Armie Hammer as the Green Hornet. And if you paid attention to the comic book connection, it even works. Like he looks like the Lone Ranger because they're related.
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Oh, man. Now they've listen, Universal, you got to get Hammer on the phone. It's Hammer time. My new favorite movie reviewer comes from the New York Post, a guy named Lou Lumenick. Do you guys have any idea why I like Lou Lumenick?
First of all, alliterative name. You like that.
he was a positive movie review that I pulled for Mission Impossible 2. The guy gets me. Anyway, here's what he said about this movie. He said it's an overblown, interminable, unfunny update. And I kind of agree with him. I'm not enjoying the action. I'm not enjoying the comedy. The parts that I do enjoy, maybe I wouldn't be enjoying if they were surrounded by better interstitials. It's like that thing. You got to find something to like if you're there for 2 hours. This is like, it's competently made in some way, so I'm not going to go all the way to the bottom, but it is Stephanie Brown to me. I don't want to watch this again.
Sean, what do you got?
Stephanie Brown. This movie is a mess, and it's made by people who have just recently started making big budget movies, and it shows. I don't care that Michel Gondry is the director. This movie is a mess. Michel Gondry did the best he could. And this is what we got. And if you want to watch an actually funny, like touching, heartwarming movie, see Be Kind, Rewind. That movie is great.
Also,
and it also is directed by Michel Gondry.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, this was like his last big Hollywood kind of thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, his last big Hollywood movie. He's been directing. It's like some smaller things that you've never really heard of. But as far as like being the big Hollywood guy, I think those days may be gone for Mr. Gondry. It's probably for his own choice too. I'm not saying like Hollywood has eschewed the man. I think he's probably been like, this maybe isn't the way that I want to do, because he's one of those guys that was big like in music videos and commercials and stuff like that, who was just really, really talented. And this is material that is frankly beneath him.
Yeah,
it really is. He's a better director.
I'm really
than
interested
this.
to see what you give this movie. What are you giving this movie?
But this is a Tim Drake. I don't know why. I think it was I just had the lowest expectations going in, and for some reason, and like, listen, I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for you, but it was a Saturday night. I enjoyed turning up the sound and just watching a stupid Seth Rogen movie. It had there's a lot of problems with it. I grant you, everything that you guys have said about this thing is 100% on. I absolutely agree with. But for some reason, I liked it well enough. So beats me. Well, that is it, everybody. Another one in the books here for us. Next week, because we had that Patreon thing come in and you guys voted at the last couple of seconds here, bringing that total for Robin Hood actually higher than Green Hornet. Next week, we're going to be reviewing Robin Hood from 1938, starring the great Errol Flynn. I'm excited for this. If you guys have never seen this one, am I right in that?
I've seen it like when I was, 9.
A wee little lad. Yeah, most people, if they've seen it, they probably did see it much when they were, younger. It's one of those Disney things that they would, or that would put somewhat like Disney.
On Sunday morning, yeah.
So
when I was pretending to be an artsy fartsy kid, I went through my movie like the movies everyone's supposed to watch, like Casablanca, Maltese Falcon, and all this stuff. And for some reason, this never made that list, so I've never seen it.
So we will be checking that out next week. In the meantime, Bruce, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
I say people go over to Chubby Wizard. Check out the recent episode where Silas and I, my 12-year-old son and I, sit and spend a little time talking about his first viewing of a classic movie, Jason and the Argonauts. Well worth a listen, I think, if you have a little soft spot in your heart for Jason and the Argonauts, as I do, or Ray Harryhausen in general, as I also do. Watch that and see what an idiot a 12-year-old can be talking about it.
Yeah. Sean, what else?
So it's basically like Bruce talking to Bruce Jr. about Jason and the Argonauts.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what that is. I've never seen Jason and the Argonauts. I've never seen that movie either.
Oh, you need to watch it.
If you want to find more of my work, go to Star Wars Clone Wars 30 Questions. We just laid down the tracks for a new episode of that. But more so, watch the last 2 episodes of Clone Wars, because my word, you have no idea what you're missing. It's so good.
Yeah, even if you haven't been following anything to this point, watch the last 2 episodes.
Especially if you haven't. Just watch the last 2 episodes. You will thank me later.
Episodes 9 and 10.
Owe me a high five.
Yeah, start with episode 9 in season 7 and have yourself a good old-fashioned time, and then come over to Clone Wars 30 Questions, and we'll complete your destiny. And, of course, check out the Film Find over at the Film Find, wherever you find finer podcasts. Matt and I are doing a whole bunch of reviews and stuff like that of all varying varieties. That's the fun part, is we're going all over the map for this stuff. So check that out wherever you find finer podcasts. That is it, everybody. Join us next week when we're talking Robin Hood. For Sweet Schnauzy from the internet, Bruce Leslie, I'm Adam Portrais. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Edie.
So just let me introduce myself. My name is Humpty, pronounced with the umpty. Yo, ladies, oh, how I like to funk thee. And all the rappers in the top 10, please allow me to bump thee. I'm stepping tall, y'all, and just like Humpty Dumpty, you're gonna fall when the stereos pump me. I like to rhyme, I like my beats funky, I'm spunky. I like my oatmeal lumpy, I'm sick with this. Straight gangster Mac. But sometimes I get ridiculous. I'll eat up all your crackers and your licorice. Oh, yo, fat girl, come here, are you ticklish? Yeah, I called you fat. Look at me, I'm skinny. It never stopped me from getting busy. I'm a freak. I like the girls with the boom. I once got busy in a Burger King bathroom. I'm crazy. Allow me to amaze thee. They say I'm ugly, but it just don't faze me. I'm still getting in the girls' pants, and I even got my own